right, guys, welcome back. What you see in front of you is actually a very, very simple breakdown of the Treaty of Paris in 1898. If you remember, this is the third Treaty of Paris that we're going to look at. The Treaty of Paris, very first one we looked at, ended the French and Indian War. Second one ended the American War for Independence, and the third one is going to end the Spanish-American War. So I don't care that you know exact dates in this class, but I do need you to be familiar with the sequence of events. So how those treaties fit together, and I need you to know the ballpark year. If you're telling me that the Treaty of Paris that ends the French and Indian War is signed in 1786, that's the second one, then you've obviously missed the boat because the American War for Independence is already over, and I need you to know that the French and Indian War is before the U.S. War for Independence. So this Treaty of Paris, signed in 1898, this is the result of an American victory. The United States is going to gain its first true colonies, its first true imperial possessions, not really counting Alaska, at the end of this conflict. Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, they all become territorial possessions of the United States. The U.S. is going to pay Spain a token kind of $20 million. It's almost like, yeah, we know we're taking all your stuff, but here's a little bit of money so we don't feel quite as bad about it. So Spain does get $20 million, but Cuba here is kind of the anomaly to the whole equation. Cuba is granted its independence by this Treaty of Paris, technically speaking. Now, the Platt Amendment really does restrict that Cuban freedom, however. So the Platt Amendment, if you guys want to, you can take a look at this quick little video here. We're not going to watch the whole thing in the screencast, obviously, but this will tell you the conditions of the Platt Amendment. I'm going to explain them to you here instead. So the Platt Amendment, basically, for U.S.-Cuban relations, is going to do three things that will define how the U.S. and Cuba interact with each other from 1898 all the way until 2018 and even beyond that. So the Platt Amendment had three stipulations that directly impacted American-Cuban relations. Number one, the Platt Amendment says that Cuba will be subject to U.S. interference whenever the United States sees fit. So basically, the United States could interfere in Cuban affairs anytime it wanted to. An example of that would be, let's say that Cuba decided to pass an additional tax on all sugarcane being exported. Well, that would be bad for U.S. business. So the United States, according to this Platt Amendment, could theoretically say, no, Cuba, you can't pass that tax. We're not going to allow you to do that. And could basically tell Cuba what to do. That's exactly how the U.S. would treat a colony. But by granting Cuba its independence, the United States really doesn't have to pay to administer Cuba. It can just tell it what to do. Now, one point to be very clear here, and I probably should have made this at the very beginning. The Platt Amendment is an amendment that the United States forces the Cuban people to write into the Cuban Constitution after the Treaty of Paris signed in 1898. So this isn't an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. This is an amendment to the Cuban Constitution. So this amendment basically makes it illegal for Cuba to really do anything domestically without the U.S. approval. Second point is that Cuba cannot enter into any treaties with foreign nations without the consent of the United States. Simply put, because if Cuba decided to sign a bunch of treaties with the Netherlands, or France, or Great Britain, then they might create closer bonds with those nations. And then guess who they're going to sell their sugar to? Guess who they're going to lease land to for naval bases right next to the U.S. southern border? So the United States doesn't want Cuba really interacting with any other powers other than itself. And then thirdly, Cuba is required to sell or lease land to the United States to be used for either naval bases or coaling stations as it sees fit. That is the result of that is Guantanamo Bay. You can kind of see it here on this little screen, and if you go through and actually watch this, you'll see that it kind of does a little short, I guess, snippet on what Guantanamo Bay is and that kind of thing. But Guantanamo Bay Naval Station, that's still in Cuba today, direct result of this particular amendment in the Cuban Constitution. Okay. So Cuba has its independence. However, the Philippines does not. If you remember this little nice diagram, the Philippines becomes an imperial possession of the United States. The Filipinos don't like this. So basically, instead of ending the fighting in 1898, after the Treaty of Paris is signed, the Filipino freedom fighters basically just keep on fighting. The United States wants to govern it as a territory because, from a U.S. Congress point of view, if you look at the Philippines here, surrounded by the Dutch East Indies, and then France controls Indochina, which is kind of right here off the map. What you've got is the Netherlands and France surrounding the Philippines, and Congress fears that a free Philippines would be very vulnerable to foreign takeover. Basically, Congress deduces, in its infinite wisdom, that the Philippines are going to be colonies of someone. Either France is going to take them, or the Netherlands is going to grab them up, or we're going to take them in the United States. But they're going to be a colonial possession of somebody, so they might as well be us. When the United States declares the Philippines are now a U.S. territory, the Filipino rebels just keep on fighting. They use guerrilla tactics, hit and runs. They try to disrupt supply trains coming to the supply shipping, and they try to disrupt supply movements while on the Philippines. But ultimately, Emilio Aguinaldo, who is here, Aguinaldo just can't really continue the fight for years and years and years. They hold on for as long as they can, but eventually they're ground down and defeated in 1902, and that's kind of the end of the Filipino resistance movement. So that's where we're going to stop this screencast. When we come back, we're going to take a look at why colonies are significant, and then talk about kind of the prize for America, which is Panama and the Panama Canal.